Should we do it?
Let's give it a whirl.
I'm looking forward to the dinner tonight.
Yes, that'll be fun.
I feel like this is... Are you looking forward to the dinner, Gabriel? Are you invited? No. Hi, and welcome to another episode of Manufacturing Matters, the podcast where we talk about all matters manufacturing. And today we're talking about a very, very important topic or industry, the food and beverage industry, and namely the challenges that are facing this very important industry for us all. And today, my guest is Lee from the US office of Factbird in New Jersey.
Boston.
Boston. Okay, that's where you're based.
Yes.
Boston. Good, I should know that. And you're the sales director for North America for Factbird. You've got years and years and years of experience working in manufacturing.
That's right, yeah.
Welcome, Lee.
Thank you, appreciate you having me, Michael.
Yeah, no problem. So today I'm going to ask Lee what the main challenges are facing the food and beverage industry in 2024, that's a big question. We could talk about it for a long time, but we're going to try and do it in 10 minutes or less. So here we go. Lee, what are the main challenges facing the food and beverage industry in 2024?
Well, I know you're asking a sales guy to trim it down to 10 minutes, so there's a lot we could talk about. Michael, I think you've brought up a really important topic because it affects not only the North American market, but also the global economy and the world at large in terms of what consumers are facing and also what food and beverage manufacturers are being challenged by. And so when we look at the marketplace, especially in North America, obviously we're seeing things like the cost of living adjustments that are taking place across the country, as well as things like disruptions to the supply chain that has historically been fairly stable, but in recent years has been hit by some certain challenges. Additionally, things like food and beverage manufacturers are facing with labor shortages and skilled worker shortages really across the globe, as well as we move from a more manual to an analog type of production scale. We're moving obviously into digital transformation and 4.0 industry initiatives. And then also looking at things like the growing risk that comes with those digital transformation, things such as cybersecurity and the risks associated with implementing more and new technology into our supply chain, as well as what consumers are facing when they go to a grocery store, when they go to make buying decisions around consumer trends. So there's a lot we can talk about. And like I said, we'll try to fit it into like a nice tight 10 minutes here, but I think it would be educational, especially not just for consumers, but for our food and beverage producers, processors, and manufacturers across the globe.
Yeah, it's a good orientation point. Really interesting topic. I really enjoyed reading about it. So yeah, could you talk to me a little bit about the cost of living crisis and how that's affecting food and beverage manufacturers?
Yeah, it's a really, really good starting point for us to begin our conversation today. So what we're seeing really across North America, and you can provide feedback around, the global economy at scale, is around the inflation that we're seeing, right? Yeah. So when consumers are going to the grocery store, not only are they dealing with rising costs of those food and beverage products and the products that they're making a selection for their dinner table that evening, but they're also being challenged as well by the job insecurity that is in the market economy as a whole, right? So when you're going as a consumer to the grocery store and you're trying to make a purchase decision for your hard-earned American dollar, right? You're trying to figure out, do I want to go with the more prestige brands that I'm used to seeing, or do I want to try an unknown brand, or maybe a store-generated brand, right? A private label brand, if you will, right? And so if I'm a food and beverage manufacturer, that's one of the growing concerns that I have, is that as our grocery bills continue to rise and as we have some relative job insecurity in the marketplace, how am I going to continue to look at my profit margins and continue to get eyesight and mind share in the mind of the consumer when they're going and making those buying decisions?
Yeah, it's definitely been noticeable, the increase in prices in the supermarket. And so in Europe, a lot of people have moved more to these sort of German discounter supermarkets that you have, like Aldi and Netto and whatnot. And I definitely noticed it with 2 kids, like, oh, okay, that's how much food costs now. So checking out the budget brands. And as you said, that affects the manufacturers and the pressure with margins. So yeah, good point.
Absolutely, right? It's putting a very big strain on what those manufacturers are facing, which in a lot of ways ties into what we had mentioned about during the introduction to this topic, which is those supply chain disruptions that they've been experiencing.
So that's putting even more pressure on as well, right? So you've got pricing pressure from the consumers, and then it's also harder to make stuff because of the cost of the materials are going up, or getting the materials. Could you talk a bit more into that topic?
Yeah, I think you've really hit it there, which is the fact that as a manufacturer, right, we've seen shortages of those raw materials that they're utilizing. And on top of that, we have seen in the last X amount of years certain global disruptions, right, to the supply chain as a whole. So whether it's things like the COVID-19 or whether it's wars that are taking place across the globe, both of those things are contributing to the disruptions on a global scale that we've been facing. And in addition to that, you also have, and you might be able to talk better to this, but things like international trade tensions, or, you know, we're entering an election cycle this year in the US economy, right? So all of these types of things may contribute to disruptions in the supply chain, or further compounding the issues that manufacturers face as they go to produce these goods.
Yeah, so the election coming up in the US is definitely something that everybody in the world pretty much is aware of. And yeah, that definitely generates some uncertainty for manufacturers, what will be happening there in terms of trade agreements. And then in Europe, obviously the big one is Brexit. All of a sudden borders were reintroduced to a massive market in Europe, and all the complications that come with that, with producing stuff and sourcing material. So that was a really good one as well. Supply chain disruption. And another sort of effect of Brexit wasn't only sourcing materials and products, but also the movement of people, which sort of segues us nicely into the next challenge.
Yeah, absolutely, right? I think the manufacturing industry as a whole is seeing kind of a disruption in terms of workforce management and also labor shortages. And so part of the challenges that they're facing is the inclusion and introduction of new skilled labor into their workforce. So what they've historically had is a lot of folks that have deep tribal knowledge in terms of how their processes work, how the machines may work, how the workflows for that type of the process go, and they're retiring every day. And so as you look at the new generation of people entering the workforce and coming in, there's a significant gap between what that inherent knowledge has been at these organizations, as well as the knowledge of maybe newer ways to do things, and blending that newer, more 21st century knowledge, if you will, with the inherent knowledge that has made these organizations successful. And so when you take those issues and you compound them with also the management of that workforce and the additional pressures that are being applied to these manufacturers, you can see how, with the margins being what they are as they exist today, and with the challenges in the consumer market, that manufacturers are really struggling at the integration of these things. So in other words, in the food and beverage industry, are they doing enough sorts of things at the educational level so that there is a more of a transition happening as they enter the skilled workforce economy?
So to make a more attractive place to work after you leave school.
Yeah, in some place that people want to be and want to continue the evolution of the manufacturing process as it relates to food and beverage, because it's a fantastic industry to be a part of. And so how do you blend those things together? And so as you know, we've been talking about over a few minutes here, you can see how these various issues and the ones that we've yet to touch on sort of compound onto each other, not just from a production standpoint, but from a knowledge standpoint as well. And I think that's what we're seeing as we look at the industry as a whole, is how do we take the new generation of talent entering the workforce, combine that with the generation that is retiring and entering retirement age, and not have significant gaps in production trade-off.
That's a massive challenge for food and beverage manufacturers. And I've definitely heard stories from colleagues about there's also a bit of intergenerational tension at times, which you have everywhere, right? So the new people, the younger generation come in and they have new ways of doing things. Maybe they want to introduce a product like Factbird to make data-driven decisions. Older generations, with all their experience, you can use that experience to make a lot of good decisions without having to use quite as much data. And I've heard of some tension and sort of changing ways of working there with new data-driven processes, which I think brings us nicely into the next challenge, which is...
Yeah, it's huge. Digital transformation, right? I mean, it's an operational normality at this point, Michael, for organizations. You know, when you look at the most recent surveys and studies that have been coming out regarding digital transformation, Industry 4.0, and more automation initiatives, this is where we are headed. I think a survey that I've been looking at is organizations are seeing a 20% increase in revenue operations versus ones that are relying on strictly a manual process, right? That's a significant revenue gap for organizations, and it's also ties into that skill gap, right? Are there ways to bridge the technology gap between the younger workforce that's entering the food and beverage industry with the folks that have that knowledge that are retiring? And so when we look at a drive towards things like automation, digital transformation, analytics, right? Data-driven decision-making for the organizations as we see tightening razor margins across the board in the industry, we need to look at the adoption of new technology, like you mentioned, right? Things that allow us to look at things like real-time production monitoring or machine learning, and also the aspects of cloud-based application that comes as part of the digital transformation. And so, as you alluded to, right, the challenge is in the adoption and integration of these new technologies into this, right? And so how do we ensure that we're protecting our data as an organization while integrating some of this automation into what we're doing today? And what do we look at as an organization where we're looking at things like cost, training, and integration into our existing systems? This can be extremely difficult at executive and leadership level to try to figure out across the board at plants and offices, how do we bring all of these systems and processes together? Because some might have 20, 30, 40 different things that they're using or more.
Yeah.
And that's an organizational challenge that they're facing.
Massive. Yeah. I've heard that a lot on factory visits. The change management of introducing new manufacturing software is tricky. So Factbird is plug and play. It's easy to use, but there's definitely still a challenge there, getting that working from the shop floor level, getting the buy-in from operators, and then also the buy-in from the board level. I just keep hearing it again and again with all the good case studies that our cameraman Gabriel has produced. Shout out to Gabriel. So digital transformation, it's a massive challenge, and it's also a solution. So that's a really interesting one, and we could talk about that for a long time.
Yes.
You kind of touched on another challenge there as well. So with moving sort of operational technology, or connecting operational technology to the cloud and connecting more systems with IoT or IT, then there's also problems with, or a challenge with cybersecurity, I guess.
There is, right? And so you see that, I mean, it seems like every day in the news, we're getting a new news alert about some sort of data breach somewhere or some challenge that the digital transformation as a global economy is facing, right? So when we look at that from a production standpoint, there are operational technologies in the field that are connected to the cloud. So you have data breach concerns, you have cybersecurity threats, right? Someone assuming identities or opening an email they shouldn't be opening and assuming credentials, bad actors, as you put right across, where they're trying to use phishing attacks to get information, right? Any way into that digital system, right? And so organizations, on top of facing all of the challenges that we've already been discussing here, are also very much concerned with the protection of their data and what are the backup and recovery procedures and protocols in place that you can do as you're looking to implement more digital automation and transformation into your company.
Yeah, so it's definitely a new or at least growing challenge for manufacturers. So as you make more stuff digital, then you also need to make sure it's secure as part of the process. And it's not something to think about at the end of an investment in new software or capital investment. It's something that should be part of the decision making from the very beginning, right?
100%. And you need to go with trusted partners that have security as a forefront as part of their development and as part of their existing solution that they're providing to the organization. Because as a company, right, that is one of your most valuable things that you own is that proprietary technology, that data that helps make you better as an organization.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
And so without partnering, you have to partner with organizations that have that at the forefront of their decision making as well.
Yeah, so I guess a lot of manufacturers, they'll be working with consultants that are ideally be thinking of that as part of the process. Yeah, so that's a big one. So those are really good topics that you've covered thus far, and we're really shooting through them, which is great for this type of podcast that we're operating here. Are there any more challenges?
Yeah, I think there's one more that comes to mind, Michael, which is consumer trends, right? And I think that's one of the central focuses of food and beverage manufacturers.
Yeah.
Because you have so many different things that when you go into the marketplace as a consumer, you talk to anybody, they're like, well, I want to be healthy. I want my family to be healthy.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, so what does that mean, right? And so food and beverage manufacturers have their pulse on what those trends are dictating based on what people want to see, right? Many, many, many years ago, there was a focus on easy, and there still is today, right? But the shift now you're starting to see to more sustainable, ethically produced products, right? Clean labels. Where is my food coming from? I want to know about it, right?
Yeah.
Healthier options. And on top of that, we're also seeing with the increase in technology that's entered our global economy, we're seeing things like in the USDA giving approval to 3 products that are made for cultivated meat, right? And Singapore and Switzerland have also approved cultivated meat products. So not only do food and beverage manufacturers have a lot of the issues that we've already been discussing, and each one could be its own very long conversation, right?
Yeah.
But you also have to keep in mind that when consumers enter a marketplace, that they're super concerned about trends, and food and beverage manufacturers have to be at the heart of those trends in order to figure out how they move forward in a way that allows them to continue to grow their margins as a business.
Yeah, that's massive. We could talk about that for ages. So it's for whatever reason, there's many different reasons why people change their eating habits. Like maybe they're concerned about greenhouse gases, maybe it's animal welfare, maybe it's healthier eating. We could keep listening to them forever. There's also regulatory stuff, especially in Europe. People are looking for new types of products. So then food and beverage manufacturers have to develop these new products to meet the demand and continue growing. And the cultivated meat example is fascinating. I didn't realize that there were so many that were already approved. So this sort of lab-grown meat, which that must be a massive challenge for manufacturers out there today. And I'm sure there must be lots of other challenges that we could talk about, but it's probably a good time to cut it.
Probably, right? We could get into regulatory requirements and all sorts of other challenges. But I think, one of the takeaways is at the core of what we've been talking about today. If as a processor, producer, or food and beverage manufacturer, how are we tying together the more traditional processes that we've been using along with the knowledge that we have in-house as a manufacturer with the digital and ability to move into a more technological workforce? And I think that's where Factbird really can help in the plug-and-play solution.
There's the salesman.
Well, I'd be remiss if I didn't say that, that's one of the ability to get access to data in 15 minutes of having it on your production line is world changing. And the ability to interface with different ERPs and with systems that you have in-house today and to really get up and see the efficiency on day one is, for a lot of organizations, the starting point of this journey.
Yeah, it's amazing. For me, working in manufacturing or lean manufacturing is relatively new. I've worked in other IoT company and other technology companies, and just finding out how digitized some businesses are and how undigitized some businesses are. So I was really surprised learning about a lot of sort of manual collection of data, notes going up on whiteboards possibly being erased, data being lost, people not knowing for sure how many units have been produced. So it's a really fascinating industry to be in with its stage in the sort of digitization journey. And Factbird is one company that can help with that really well.
Yeah, it's one. It's right. I think what we're seeing, to your point, is companies want to move away from looking at data as a reactive format and more to a proactive format, right? So rather than trying to figure out what happened a week ago or a day ago or a month ago, they want to be able to forward look into the future and be able to make predictive trends based on some of the issues we've talked about, as well as some of the ones we haven't, so that they continue to grow and obviously employ more people and continue to take us into the next generation of production.
Yeah, there was a really interesting, if you go to our website and check out our Broxburn Bottlers case study, that was quite an interesting one. It's a company from Scotland where they're making gin and whiskey. Anything else, Gabriel, that they're making there?
I don't know.
Okay. Yeah. So they're making gin and whiskey there. And it was quite fascinating hearing people say, I really love just being able to look at the last shift or the previous day, see what went wrong before I start today, so I can sort of have an idea about what's going to go wrong. So even as basic as that, like if you've just got some basic visibility of what's been happening, operators, line managers, they can make big changes in how they do things.
Yeah, I mean, I really appreciate the marketplace and what they're trying to accomplish, and they're trying to get the right products into the hands to help consumers. And so I'm really energized to get to be a part of that in some way for them. And so we're really excited about being able to partner with these organizations and also help them face some of these key organizational challenges they face now and they'll face throughout 2024 and potentially the future.
Brilliant. And I'm very energized for the dinner that we're going to be having later tonight to support the food and beverage industry and celebrate you coming to visit us in Copenhagen. So thanks for your time, Lee.
Thanks, Michael. Appreciate it. It's great to be here.
And thank you for listening.
I don't think that 20% figure was right, so give me a second. Yeah, no, it was actually. All right, one survey saw manufacturers usually saw a 20% difference in revenue growth. Okay.
That was perfect.
How'd that go?
I think it was good.